Welcome to Email Autopsy. I'm Brendan Ziolo, and I've spent years in B2B marketing, writing, sending, and yes, occasionally cringing at emails.
And I'm Pauline Gabitsis. I'm a behavioral scientist who studies why people do or don't respond to what lands in their inbox.
Every episode, we take a real email apart through the marketer's eyes and the scientist's lens.
We'll show you exactly what's working, what isn't with some fixes, and the psychology behind all of it. Welcome to episode 5 of Email Autopsy. So far, we've taken apart the words, the subject line and the preview text, which earn the open, and the body copy, which earns the conversion. But today, we're looking at the thing that your reader judges before they've even read a single part of your body copy. Design is different from everything else we've covered because the reader forms an impression of it visually before anything else. And here's what I think might surprise some of you. The right amount of design isn't fixed. It changes depending on the type of B2B email that you're sending. So sometimes more design wins, while other times actually having no design wins. Brendan, let's take our audience through some of the emails that we pulled.
All right, so this first one is interesting. It actually came from a company that makes some very lovely Apple accessories, but we're going to hide the name because I'm not sure they do their emails as nicely as they do their products. So this is how it arrived in my inbox, and this is what's surprising to me because there's really nothing here. So at first scan, I think it's spam or I think it was sent in error or something. There's just no detail. And the reason for that is that many email clients, even some email sending platforms, block images, force you to accept the images. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So it's just a lot of stacked gray boxes. And there's a little tiny sentence along the bottom that you probably wouldn't even get to and read. So it's important to make sure you understand the shortcomings or these issues with your emails so that it doesn't come in fully blank like we see here. Now, if you actually click download images, like this email looks really, really nice. And that's the point. Someone designed this, spent a lot of time on it. And when they view it with all the images, it looks great. But that's not how it's arriving at the vast majority of your recipients. So you need to be very careful how you balance between beautiful design and a lot of images and actually getting some copy and messaging across.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Brendan, because this is another email that hits exactly that, right? On the right-hand side, this is how it rendered in the inbox initially. And again, most of the images are not accessible immediately when I open this email. And so you have to be a motivated user to click download external images or go to settings to actually see this email itself. But what Canva did here that's different than what you just shared, Brendan, is that not everything is embedded in the image. And so the very important element of this email, which is the call to action, is still very present on my screen, even if I don't download images. And then if you download images, you see, of course, this really beautiful Canva Create email, which of course shouldn't be surprising. Canva is a design company. They design beautiful emails. But I think that's really the main takeaway here is that if you are designing your email, make sure some of it is HTML hard coded so that if it doesn't render in someone's inbox, the key takeaway is still very visible and present in the email itself.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think this is a good middle ground, but between being able to send a really nice looking email and sending one that still gets some message across if you don't have your images turned on or don't want to click that extra button to see them. This email takes another interesting approach from a design perspective. It's built to look like an invite to a meeting. And we all kind of know what those look like and we understand what you do with them. So it's leveraging a well understood principle and a well understood format here. It also does a really good job with the call to action, which is the accept invitation. We've talked about the endowment effect before, and once you feel like you already have access or you're already part of something, it's a much easier ask. And that's what this accept invitation implies. It sounds like you're already signed up and ready to go for this. And that's a great thing as well. I am slightly concerned that if you don't know a lot about this company, you're going to see the title of the session, but there's not a lot of other details. So I am a bit unsure if I would sign up for this because I don't know what this is about. But again, the more detail they add, the less simple it would be. So it's a bit of a catch 22. But maybe my bigger concern here is what happens after the accept invitation. And that's because I didn't recognize Trigify initially. I've clearly come across them at some point, signed up for their emails at some point. So I'm not suggesting this is spam. But I didn't remember who they were or why I would be getting a meeting invite. So my initial reaction was that it was spam. Why am I getting this meeting invite? Is someone trying to catch me up in something? Then when I clicked accept invitation, it took me to a page to register. So that expectation setting was a bit off. When I click accept, I expect it to just be added to my calendar, but here I needed to register. So I'm a bit on the fence. Design wise, I like it, but the principle behind it, I'm still unsure of because it looks like a meeting invite, but I do still need to register. I don't want to go down that path too far because this is email autopsy and we're looking at design. But I'm thinking, Pauline, do we need another autopsy series around landing pages, perhaps?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet, but I do like the comment here of what's happening. And there's a lot of expectation violation going on if after this it's a really long form instead of, as you said, Brendan, just being added to your calendar. Notion does a better job of this. And one of the reasons why is it because they have a bit more of that context around what this event is about. So even if you didn't really know much about Notion, you're at least getting a bit of context around what the event is they're inviting you to. And then two elements of this email I really like. The first is a bit of Gestalt psychology here on proximity theory. So the time and the place paired together. And what that does psychologically is it creates some processing fluency. And it makes it a lot easier for me to figure out where is the most important information around when this is happening. But it's very clear where the logistics lie. The second piece of this email that I really like is the PS, the postscript. And the reason I like this is because we know from research that a lot of people, especially if they're skimming, the part that they do read of an email is the postscript. And the postscript here really is a key barrier that might cause people not to register for this event in the first place, which is that they're not available. And so the postscript says, can't make the virtual event, register anyway, we'll send the replay. There's a clear benefit then. You're going to see more people signing up and registering because they are overcoming a clear barrier to their users. Now, the one drawback I will say about this email that I don't love is they've used a lot of their space with this upfront uh, image that doesn't really do a lot for them, but takes up space. And I do wonder, on a mobile phone, if someone were to open this email, if this CTA register now would be at thumb level or if a user would have to scroll down to actually click. We know once you get people scrolling, you're much less likely to actually get people to see the CTA in the first place and click through. So those are sort of my key takeaways from looking at this. But overall, I think this is better than the previous email that we just saw. And I'm curious, Brendan, what you think in comparison.
I do like this email a lot more, and I think it's a good example of where less design can definitely shine through. I'm not quite sure I understand that header image here and what value it provides, so it either needs to be removed and not used or thought through. The other thing I would mention here that I've learned through this process with you is the register now button may not be the best copy on the CTA. Register makes it sound like there's a lot of effort here, right? I'm going to have to go to something. I'm going to have to sign up. How long's the form going to be? Do I really want to participate? So, while I wasn't sure on the expectation side with the Trigify email, their accept invite was a much better call to action there. So it's a matter of figuring out what the right words are here for that CTA. Because, yeah, I'm not sure register now is right on this one.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot in this episode today, some really great takeaways for event invites. And those are exactly the type of emails that I think, all of our listeners should be designing for. You should make your event invite seem exciting and use color to draw attention and have clear visual hierarchy and do things called the F pattern, which is basically following how people look at a page, which is in an F shaped pattern. But I want to flip it a little bit because the more interesting question is when should you not design an email? And I think the cold email is the perfect place to sort of put your design tools down. And the reason for this is around reciprocity, right? If you get an email that's heavily designed, it feels like it came from a brand, it came from a machine, it's an organization. It's a lot easier to ignore it and delete it versus if you feel like it came from another human being, someone who actually spent a lot of time and effort onto it. And I think that the way you design your email can signal whether or not it's coming from a person or from an organization. So I just wanted to give this case study example from the UK. The government actually sent out two different letters to customers or consumers to see what works better in getting people to respond. Do really beautifully designed letters get people to respond more, or do more boring letters get people to respond more? Most of us would say always the beautiful design that look better, grab people's attention more. And so, of course, if it looks nice, people will respond. But what they found in this field experiment was that actually the boring design consistently won. It led to 25 to 45% more people responding to this letter. And the reason or the rationale that the researchers give for this is because it actually lies in the mental model and is consistent with how people view government communications. Ones that are more boring, let's say, black and white, less colorful, less design, they signal credibility, they signal authority, versus ones that were more colorful sort of signaled less credibility, and people sort of questioned if this was actually from the government or not. And I think this lesson holds true for cold emails. If I were to receive a cold email that was really beautifully designed, I probably am thinking this is spam. They've probably sent it to hundreds of other people like me. I can easily delete this. Compare this to this cold email that I actually received, which I thought was really nice. No design whatsoever. But because of that, I actually read it. A lot of the copy is doing the heavy lifting here, but because this lacks design, it actually increases the likelihood I'm going to read it and potentially respond because of that reciprocity. I want to respond to the other human who took time and effort and research to actually write me a personalized email.
One of the big takeaways to me is that you're going to spend a lot of time on developing your email and then designing your email. But please, before you send it, make sure you do a test or a view where you have the images off. You don't want to happen what we saw at the first email where it was just a stack of boxes and no copy at all. You need to find that balance so at least some of the message and the CTA gets through without having to download the images. So again, a takeaway is to test and review. And I would also do it in multiple email clients too, because they all tend to do things slightly differently.
Absolutely. And one other thing is to think about when design actually matters. So in those event invites, design can be a huge power to you, right? You can actually design the email to signal what the email is meant to be doing, like those event invites that we saw that look like calendar invites. Whereas sometimes design actually is not something that you want to be doing, especially for those B2B cold emails. And so really think about what is the right context in which you should actually be investing time and effort into the design of your email.
All right. Well, that's all we have for the design of emails. And at long last, in our next episode, we get to the moment we've all been waiting for. And that's how do you get the click itself? And this all comes down to the call to action, where good emails either pay off or they quietly fade away. See you next time.
If you found this useful, subscribe, leave us a comment, and share it with whoever in your organization is responsible for your email marketing.
And here's something we'd really love. Send us a real email and we'll weave it into a future episode or have a personalized email autopsy session with you. The link is in the description. No deck, no pitch, just book a time.
We're Email Autopsy. See you next episode.